My first job right out of university was an inside sales job for a company out of Toronto. And I lasted 90 days in that job before I got promoted and shipped off to Edmonton as an outside salesperson. And then for the next 20 years, I was just this lucky sales guy who had this unbelievable knack of showing up in front of the right place at exactly the right time. And I was a top performer for every single company that I worked for, right up until the fall of 2001, when I joined a technology firm the day before 9/11. And even in a post-9/11 environment, I became the #1 salesperson in the entire country in less than 6 months. Unfortunately, that company was called WorldCom. And not long after I became the top sales guy in the country, they went on to admit that they conducted $11 billion with a B, $11 billion in accounting fraud. And at the time I was engaged, and I'd been with this lady for 6 years. And that was the day that she came home and said to me, if there's no security in my job, she's not having children. And 3 weeks later, she moved out. Now, that whole time I was being a salesperson, what I really wanted to be was an entrepreneur. So at that point, I decided it's just before my 40th birthday, and I'd always promised myself if I was going to be an entrepreneur, I would do it before I was 40. So I simplified my life, and all I had left was car payments and a dog. And at that point, my goal as an entrepreneur was I wanted to be a millionaire. That was my goal. I'd been to one of those self-help weekends where you punch through the board, and the board that I had was I wanted to be a millionaire. So what I decided to do was start a company. And about that time, I'd heard about some research that predicts what it is that makes entrepreneurs successful. And the data suggests that the biggest predictor of success of an entrepreneur is basically the size of your network. And this all happened just before LinkedIn came around. So I got on LinkedIn. I got on LinkedIn on day 8 of LinkedIn. There's over 600 million people on LinkedIn. I'm user 3,956. And I started going to networking events. And sometimes I would meet as many as 100 people a week. And one of the reasons I went to networking events is this research that I had heard of aligned with what I'd read in a book a long time ago called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And he says we should be spending more time in our life doing the things that are important but not urgent. And it turns out that relationship building and self-development are those things. So I started going to networking events. And like I said, about 100 people a month was the average that I would meet, 100 new people every single month. And some of those people, I would tell them about my business idea, and they would offer to take me for coffee. So I would go for coffee with these successful entrepreneurs, and I had this little idea for a business. And over a span of 6 months, I took this little idea and I made it really big. And then one day I got a phone call from a friend of mine named Dory in Vancouver, and he told me about a competition for billion-dollar business ideas. And first prize is $1 million US. Now this competition is held by a very famous venture capitalist. His name is Tim Draper. He runs a venture capital firm down in Silicon Valley called Draper Fisher Jurvetson. And the whole idea is he lets anybody in the world enter. If you want to enter, you have to enter 1,500 characters about your idea. Not 1,500 words, but 1,500 characters. And the plan is, of all the submissions around the world, he's going to pick 10 that get to pitch for 5 minutes to a very famous venture capitalist. So I submitted my 1,500 characters. And I looked at these submissions from all over the world. And I thought to myself, I'm going to be in the top 10. I'm going to be in the top 10. So I ran around town, talked to all these successful entrepreneurs and senior business people that I knew, told them I was going to be in the top 10. And what do you think they all said? Yeah, right. You're a snotty-nosed, first-time round entrepreneur. You have no idea what you're doing. There is no way you're going to make the top 10. Well, it turns out they were right. But it turns out that for whatever reason, Tim Draper decided to let 11 people get to the next stage, and I just happened to be 11th. So I got my 5 minutes of fame. So I get to present my idea over a webcam. The whole idea is if you're the one that gets picked, you win the contest. So I get 5 minutes, and I'm warned in advance. I don't get 5 minutes and 30 seconds. I don't get 5 minutes and 15 seconds. I get 5 minutes. And it seemed that no matter what I did, Every time I practiced, I got it down to 5 minutes and 8 seconds. And what I was thinking was that on the day that I pitch, all I have to do is talk a little faster. I can do that, and I can get it down to 5 minutes. So the day of the pitch, I'm presenting to Tim. I'm 30 seconds into my 5-minute pitch, and he starts asking me questions. And all I can think is one thing. Can you please just shut up? Because I've only got 5 minutes. But what I learned in that first 30 seconds is he loved the idea. He asked me for a business plan, which I sent down. A few days later, they phoned me up and said, Craig, here's the deal. You need to come down to California. You need to present this idea to all the partners in the firm. I'm a first-time entrepreneur. There's one thing I need right now that I don't have much of, which is money. So at the age of 40, I phoned my dad and said, Dad, I need to bum $1,000. I'm going down to California to win $1 billion idea contest and come back with $1 million prize. Now, I'm sure my dad thought I was crazy, but the good thing is he loves me, and he gave me the $1,000. I went down to California, I presented my idea, and they sent me back home with a handshake and said, move to California. So in order to collect the prize, I had to move to California. This is a really cool place called Yerba Buena Island. It is halfway between San Francisco and Oakland. It is a 6-minute commute on public transit from where I live to my office in downtown San Francisco. That commute was so short, I didn't even take my car. But I did take my dog. Now, the cool thing is when I moved to California, I found a roommate. Her name is Andrea. She was an animal control officer for the city of San Francisco. And the reason that became important is that when I got into the contest, I was single. What do you think happened by the time I moved to California? Yes, I met a lady. She plays French horn for the orchestra here in town. If you ever go to the orchestra, the good-looking lady on the left that plays French horn, her name is Heather. She's my wife. So we got married, but here was the challenge. I had to move to California to collect $1 million, and she had to stay in Calgary to keep her job. Now, we're both in our 40s, both want to have a family, so I commuted back and forth every other week trying to have a family. And luckily enough, 6 months in, that's exactly what happened. And I had to go to Tim Draper and tell him that I love your money, but I love this lady more. And I promised her, and I promised myself, I am not going to be a successful entrepreneur with a ruined marriage and dysfunctional kids. So I put in place a CEO, and I came home. And then I had a son. And then I had to reinvent myself. Because now I'm here in Calgary, and that $1 billion business idea that I had really doesn't matter. And I remember reading something in a book by a guy named Jim Collins called Good to Great, and inside Good to Great, chapter 5 talks about something called a hedgehog concept. So I was thinking, how do I find a way to create balance in my life? I wanted to find a way to make a difference now, not just make a living. And in Good to Great, he talks about the things that you're passionate about. These are the things you like to do. If you didn't have a job, you'd spend your time doing this. He talks about the things that you're gifted at. When you have a lot of things to get done, these are the things that you do because it's so easy to do them, and it makes you feel good about the progress that you're making. The last thing was, how do you make money? And these are the things that you have to do. So I looked at all the things that I liked to do and the things I was passionate about, and what I did was I created myself a big, hairy, audacious goal. And my big, hairy, audacious goal was, how do I find a way to liberate and inspire people from all walks of life to create and commercialize ideas? Now, when I moved down to California, everybody wanted to help me for $350 an hour. And what I promised is the way I would start living up to that big, hairy, audacious goal is I would give my advice away for free. Well, almost free. If you come to the Starbucks by my house, you buy me a double tall latte, you can have an hour of my time. And I started doing 6, 8, some weeks 10 coffee meetings a week. And then all of a sudden I got a phone call. And I got a phone call from the University of Calgary. And they'd heard my name and they asked if I wanted to go teach entrepreneurship at the University of Calgary. And I'm like, I have no idea how to teach, but that's squarely in my big, hairy, audacious goal. And I love what Richard Branson says when you have these opportunities. If someone offers you an amazing opportunity, but if you don't know you can do it, say yes, and then learn how to do it later. Another way to do this is say, fake it till you make it. So I went and taught at the University of Calgary. And over 3 years, I taught every single undergraduate entrepreneurship course they offer, except for one. And then there was a change inside the organization, and they decided they no longer needed me. But somebody in marketing phoned me up and said, Craig, you've got this really good rapport with students, and you're really good at teaching. Can you come teach marketing at U of C? And I went back to my big, hairy, audacious goal, which is all about how do I liberate and inspire these students. And I said to myself, teaching marketing isn't going to do that. Now, about that time, I was walking my dog in Edworthy Park, and I met a lady who used to work at Bow Valley College. And she was telling me that they'd recently named their business school the Chu School of Business and were focused on entrepreneurship. So what I decided I would do, because I wanted to teach these students, I picked up the phone, I cold called the dean of the business school, he answered his phone, and I told him that I like to help students become entrepreneurs. And that single phone call has led to the job that I have today. And this is one of the ways that I get to make a difference while I make a living. And I want to share with you one of my favorite stories about how you make things happen in life. It's a story I heard a speaker named Keith Ferrazzi give one day. And he's in a big auditorium, there's 1,300 people, and there's this table in the middle of this stage. And he sits on this table and he tells a story of when him and his dad and his mom used to live in Pittsburgh. And his dad was a janitor, if I remember the story correctly, at a steel mill. And then what was happening with all the steel mills is all the steel mills were getting shut down. And it was just before Christmas, and Keith's dad has lost his job. And they had this routine on Sundays where they would go to this Italian deli because the mom didn't let white bread in the house. It's kind of like what my son and I used to do when we used to go to Spalumbo's on a regular basis. But on this occasion, Keith's dad is driving to the deli, and he sees on the side of the road a bike. And it's obvious that the bike has been thrown away. And Keith's dad is thinking to himself, wow, do I stop and get the bike in front of my son? And what he did was he stopped, but instead of getting the bike, he went to the house that the bike was in front of. He knocked on the door. The mom answered the door, and Keith's dad told his story. And he asked if he could have the bike. And the mom said no. She said, I'd rather you come with me. She walked to the garage, she opened the door, and said, I'd rather you take one of these. So here's an ask I have for everybody in the room. Go find your big, hairy, audacious goal. And if you want some help, go networking, ask people for help, and they will help you build and help you find your own profitable purpose.